Dear Melissa, I've been working in product management for years, and I feel that since I read your book, along with others, there are so many things that can be done and that I'm still in diapers when it comes to knowledge. Of the several books I've read, three are Escaping the Bill Trap, your book. I love the concept of product kata, and I try to apply it. The Lean Product Playbook by Dan Olson, Continuous Discovery Habits by Teresa Torres. I just finished it today. My problem is that your methodology and Dan Olson's complement each other very well, but the continuous discovery approach is quite different from what you propose. Do you think both methodologies are complementary? Or maybe they're very different things to apply? So, what's your first reaction to that?
I'm a little bit surprised by it because I feel like our content is really complementary. Maybe even more so than any other two product books out there, other than Marty does a good job of inspiring everybody with here's some big ideas. That's not a dig. I love his book, but it's for the books that are getting more into the how, like this is what you should be doing. This is how you can think about things. I find they're really complementary. So I'm a little bit surprised by that.
Yeah.
Maybe like we could explore this by getting into the product kata, because I think there's a really easy connection between our work there.
Yeah. I was too. Like I was like, I think I slacked you the question as soon as I read it because I was like, I don't think these things are at odds at all. I think they work very well together. So when he talks about the product kata in here, what I try to describe to people as a product kata, which is based off of Toyota kata, is it's a continuous improvement framework, which is continuous discovery, right? And I feel like that continuous nature of the framework goes really, really well with what you teach. And in the product kata, what you basically do is understand the strategy coming down from the company. You then try to evaluate it for where your piece is. So for example, if you're a product manager on a team in a slightly larger company, like you're going to be given some goals, you're going to be given some direction around like what kinds of problems do we want to solve, not necessarily what features we want to build. So now that you have that context, you basically say, all right, where are we now? What's our current state of our product that we're looking at compared to that context from the company? And if you don't know it, you got to go out there and do some work to figure out what it is. So you got to like measure what it is. You got to see where you are in your goals. You got to understand what customers are doing now, which is a discovery, thing that you should be doing. So once you figure that out, you basically set the next goal. So you break down that really large goal that might be financial focused or like business focused into something more product focused that we can achieve faster. And then we start to kata. So we basically say, okay, in light of this goal, where are we now compared to it? Do we know enough about things? Do we have to answer more questions? Or did we get some questions answered? And do we have to build something? Like, where are we? What do we know? So I basically make people write out questions that need to be answered. And then they prioritize them and they pick which question they want to focus on first. And then they run an experiment, or they go talk to customers, or they build a prototype, or they build a version 1 and release it depending on where they are in the process. So very early on, it's heavy discovery work tools. And then later on, it's probably going to be releasing an iteration and then measuring it. And then you cycle again. So you say, okay, we released it. We got some feedback we learned. And now where are we compared to this current state? So I feel like that works super well with what you describe with the continuous discovery habits, but maybe you can shed some light on how you think that fits in or what you encourage people to do there.
Yeah, I mean, I think they overlap really nicely. Like you talk about, you start with some sort of financial outcome and you're trying to figure out how do you map that to what you can do in the short run. I talk about that as business outcomes and product outcomes, right? Mm-hmm. Like our business says we need this business outcome. That's how you're going to create value for the business. We got to translate that to a product outcome, a behavior in the product that a product team can influence. And then I think your sort of learning cycles map really nicely to the rest of the habits. Like, what are you doing to learn? Well, you're interviewing, you're assumption testing, you're visualizing what you know to stay aligned as a team. And we're working our way through all the discovery habits. Yeah, you know what I think might be happening here, and I see this a lot, is like people like really struggle with concepts that overlap.
Yeah.
It's like that synthesis of like this is similar and this is similar is hard to distinguish. And I'm not surprised, right? I feel like to do that work, you have to know both concepts really well and then kind of dig into like, okay, what's similar here? What's different here? An example of this is like OKRs.
Yeah.
So everyone on the planet is using OKRs. And the most common question I get is, how is that outcome different from an OKR?
Yeah.
Right? And it's
I
like,
get the same
okay,
thing. Yeah.
well, these are really overlapping concepts. Like, first of all, an OKR is a format. It's not like, it's a format for expressing a concept. And that concept, by the way, is an outcome, right? But when you're new, these ideas are fuzzy and confusing. So you don't have that crispness. Whereas I think you and I like have spent all day, every day thinking about these ideas forever. And we can read each other's stuff and go, oh, these overlap here,
Yeah.
right? So I don't know, to the person who submitted the question, what I would say is that I would look for the similarities more than looking for the differences, because I personally don't think we have a lot of differences, other than the fact that I hyper focus on the team level, which is
Mm-hmm.
why all the habits are focused at the team level. Whereas I feel like you're bringing, especially in your book, this broader organizational level. I
Yeah.
think that's the difference, right? But like the content overlap is spot on.
Yeah, and I will say too, like when I talk about katas, and this is a lot of the stuff that I'm doing in my new talk now to talk about it, like it scales through each level of an organization. So
Yeah.
like you would kata at the executive level, and then you would kata at the VP level, and then director level, and then the team levels, right? So like
Yep.
the kata is not just for product managers, it's actually for the whole team to get together
Yeah.
and say, what do we know? What do we not know? So I actually think there's tons of synergies there with, what your habits are. And what I try to tell people is like when you get to that part that's execute, which is the last step of the kata, which is run that experiment, design it, figure out what it is to learn, like that's when you go back and choose like which methodology you're going to use, right? Like that's
Yeah.
when you go, do I need a usability test right now? Do I need to build a prototype? Do I need to talk to customers? Do I need to do, interviews? Like what's the right tool to use at this moment? And I think that kind of trips people up because they see kata maybe more, and maybe yours too, you might run into this as well, I'm curious if you do, but I get a lot of people read my book and they go, oh, it's like it's a specific process or it's a specific tool,
Yeah.
right, instead of like guidelines of how you should be doing the work. And to be fair, like when I was starting out too, I was reconciling some of the new stuff I was learning and going, oh, I must use this tool first, and then I use this tool, and then I use that tool. And I started to realize like, no, it really just depends on the context of which what problem I'm facing. But I think a little bit of that is going on too.
Yeah. I think it's hard. Like, again, I think because we think about it all the time, it's easy for us to
Yeah.
like simplify, like, oh, this is the same and this is different, and here's where they overlap. Um, I was really like, part of the reason why I put habits in the title of my book is that I did not want to write a process book.
Yeah.
Right? It is a process, but I did not
Mhm.
want to write a process book. And like, it's so hard to convey the messiness of discovery, right? Like, people think like, oh, I have to define an outcome and then I have to discover opportunities and
Yeah.
then I move on to discovering solutions.
It's not linear.
It's not linear. Like, you could define an outcome, go have your very first customer conversation and realize you got your outcome wrong, right? Like,
Yep. Yeah.
one of the things I say all the time is every future step feeds back on the previous step, and it's all happening in parallel. And I see people make a lot of mistakes because they see it as a process. Like,
Hmm.
they create one opportunity solution tree. It's a one-time activity. They never visit it again. And
Yep.
they're like, well, this is my understanding of my customer's needs. Well, your understanding of your customer needs is really shallow because you had 3 conversations and
Yeah.
synthesized once. Like, that's not the job, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I think you're right. I think like when you're new, you really need a process. It's like scaffolding, right? You need somebody to tell you, first do this, then do this, then do that. And then I think as you gain experience, you start to see, oh, I can mix and match things.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
what's interesting about this is when I like sketched out the first opportunity solution tree, what I was trying to do with that was, how do I help a team know what to do when? Like, how do I help them see through the mess? Like, I wasn't trying to come up with like, oh, here's Teresa's framework. I was just trying to come up with like, here's a simple way to visualize what you've done and where you are. And I was trying to look for like, is there this like underlying structure in the mess of our work? And what I was hoping was that it would help unlock for teams like, oh, I have a really shallow understanding of the opportunity space. That means I need to go interview.
Mm-hmm.
Or, oh, I'm not considering enough solutions for this opportunity. I need to go ideate again. Or I have a lot of untested assumptions here. I need to go run some assumption tests. Like I was really hoping that that visual would help people see what to do when and like sort out the mess more than here's a process you follow A, B, C, and D. It
Yeah,
turns out in practice, they see it as a process, so they just
they
want to
do.
follow.
Yeah, they do. And I think like for me too, that's what I was trying to do with Kata was like, it's not about, because I think a lot of people were like, oh, first we do discovery, then we get into delivery, and then we move on, right? Like, and then that's where we go. And it's so loopy. And the reason
Yeah,
that I like teaching kata is very much for the same reason, where it's like, it's supposed to be like cyclical. And if you
yeah,
just keep asking yourself, like, have we reached our goal? And if not, why? Why could be we have the wrong outcome too, like you're
yep,
saying, right? You can go
yep.
back and you change that and you adjust it and you keep learning and you keep like growing that way. And I still think like tools that we talk about, like opportunity solution trees, like there's a moment in kata where you should be doing an opportunity solution tree when you go out and you gather all that current state and you're trying to figure out like I say the first couple steps when you do kata is usually figuring out where you're going to go. So when you have to
Yep.
set that next goal or that next direction, right? That's choosing which one of those opportunities you want on the solution tree to try to go after. Like what's my thing? And then if you prove it wrong, you change it and you move on to the next one, but you're just always continuously cycling through it. So I
You're
think like
reminding me
yeah, go
of
ahead.
like another really common thing that I see where people take an idea, like a concept,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't understand like this concept was designed for a very specific purpose.
Yeah, that's
Instead,
fair.
they try to apply it to everything, right? So, like, I get questions all the time. Hey, I'm working on an internal replatforming, or forget replatforming, because I think you can use the OST for that. But like, I'm working on a regulation, like a legal requirement where we have to build this thing. And I don't really have any discovery. So, what do I put on my opportunity solution tree? Well, why are you using an
Using one.
opportunity
Yeah,
solution
it's
tree?
not meant for
Like,
that.
an
Yeah.
opportunity solution tree helps you reach an outcome. You're trying to produce an output that's known.
It's when people try to MVP around bugs. I'm
Yeah,
like, no.
yeah. So that's a
It's
little bit like
broken.
what that tells me is that like a lot of stuff out there. And so then it's like you have all these micro bits of like where's that overlap. So I guess I have empathy for the person that submitted the question. Like I get it. I think that the product landscape is messy right now.
Yeah.
What I would recommend is just work with one concept at a time, like really try to own it. Like what's in my head right now is the Richard Feynman story where he talks about what it means to really know what a flower is. Have you ever seen that?
No, I haven't seen that one.
Do you know who Richard Feynman is?
Yeah.
Okay, so he like this video. I saw it and it motivated me to read everything he's ever written. Like he was just such a delightful human. It's like a 10-minute video and he just goes on and on about what it takes to really know something. And he talks about like knowing the name of the flower doesn't really mean you know what the flower is. And like he's a physicist, so he's getting down to the subatomic particles of the flower and what it means to be a flower, right? But like he's engaging at this depth where he's trying to fully understand a concept and where does it work and where does it not work. And like and what I love about his work is he describes it in such play terms. Like he's playing with the concept. He's stretching it. He's seeing what fits and what doesn't. And I think so many people are rushing to just collect frameworks. I think I would say like just slow down and play with the concepts.
I think that's really great advice. And I think you really nailed it. And I want to thank the person who submitted this. Like, thank you, because this is a question I get a lot. And I'm sure you get it too,
Yeah.
where it's like, I don't think this works with that. I don't think this works with that. And I think a lot of us are just out there trying to give people tools to do their work better. But if you really think about like, I think the maturity curve of when you get really great at product management is, you know, where you can just look at all these tools, all these frameworks and be like, I use this now, right? This is
Yeah.
when I have to do this, right? And you don't start thinking about the super specific processes. You're more about understanding the context and then figuring out if I can use a tool to help me learn better. So thank you so much, Teresa, for jumping on here and answering this question with me. And for those of you out there listening to the Product Thinking Podcast, please continue to ask the hard questions.